get it started with. It's 1 o'clock. Welcome to the first session right after lunch. It's always tough to do the very first session. We're going to talk about a practical HTML5. How are you going to use HTML5 today with all your legacy browsers? And how would that, a lot of things you could prepare you to, for the future of HTML5 application. So, let me just briefly introduce myself. I'm Doris Chen. I'm a developer evangelist at Microsoft. I joined Microsoft about 2 years ago. Before that, I was with Sun Microsystems, working on Java for about 10 years. My expertise area is web. So HTML5 and JavaScript jQuery are always my favorite subject to talk about. And before I joined industry, I did spend quite a few years at school. I'm specialized in computer engineering and medical informatics. Let me actually get some ideas about your background so I could really paste the content well. So how many of you have some exposure to HTML5 already? Oh, very good. Okay, so that will make my life a lot easier. Okay, so let's get started with. So the important thing for this kind of 1 hour, 15-minute session is I will be able to show you what is the process. What is the process to approach the problem, to figure out a problem, and then find the right, appropriate, like polyfills and shims to resolve the problem. So we're going to get started with what we mean browser fragmentation, and why we think feature detection is a lot better than browser detection. And then I'm going to share with you some of the tools you will be able to do feature detection very easily, and then how to find appropriate shims and the polyfills to resolve the problem. And then we're going to actually show you really step-by-step some of the demos, how do we approach a problem, what is the process you probably will be able to apply for your real-life development. So let's get started with. So, browser fragmentation. Now, we live in such a big world. There are a bunch of modern browsers which will support HTML5. There are also a lot of what we call non-modern browsers, such as IE 6 to 8, Firefox 3.6 and below, Safari 4.0 and below, Chrome 7, etc. Now, so there will be quite a lot of difference in terms of if the browser supported this particular HTML5 feature or not. And even with modern browsers, right, because of different version, different support for this kind of still evolving HTML5, so we may still see some difference in terms of even among modern browsers. So what would be the best way to do? So before we go into that, let's take a look. I took a snapshot from the browser marketplace, and let's take a look at all the browsers all over the world, people still using it, right? So I happen to run into something like called Netscape 6.0. What is that? People still using it. Something like IE6 Word edition. I don't even know there's such an edition there. There's something on Safari for Windows called Maxon edition. I don't know if anybody really using it, but people still using them, right? So you see some percentage associated with that. So even your end user, even means it's a very small group of people of your end user using it, you still have to take a look and resolve some of the problems they may have. So would that be easier? Maybe we just hire a full-time employee to go through all the different versions of browsers in the world and checking if it's working, if it's not working. That's really a full-time job. But really, it's not a fun job. I wouldn't want to do that, even though they pay me really well. So what would be a better way of doing that? Instead of checking every single browser, different versions among non-modern browsers versus all the modern browsers, how we do that? So if you think about the problem and think about the other way, perhaps things would be a lot easier. Because all you have to think about is, I have a particular HTML5 feature. And then for me, only 2 responses are available for that browser. Either yes, the browser is going to support that feature, or no, the browser is not going to support that feature, right? Things would be so much clearer without thinking about all the available browsers all around us. We would just think about if the feature will be supported or not, right? 2 responses. So feature detection will be a way more better way to handle the issues, and it will be more logical to see that, right? So really, this is actually a really good way for any kind of feature, including HTML5, CSS3, or any of the new features you think the browser may have some issue, right? So let's take a look how we actually checking that. Now, this is actually a piece of code I got it from like 4 years ago with one of my applications. And then at the time, I'm basically checking the IE browser. So I want to check if it's when actually I'm using add event listener versus when I'm not. So what I check here is I'm checking the user agent. Okay, so I'm checking if it's non-IE browser, then I'm going to use the W3C standard called add event listener. Now, when it's an IE browser, then I will do attach event, right? So, but for those you think, yes, that's fine, from IE 6 to 8, this is fine. What's wrong with that? But think about it, if it's IE 9 and above, the most current IE is IE 10 preview. Starting with IE 9 fully support HTML5 and CSS3, right? So if this is IE 9 browser, if you go into this checking, basically the first thing I would say, if it's non-IE, then I do this. So, which means IE 9 has to fit into the next condition, which is use attach event. However, IE 9 does not use attach event. IE 9 supports standard W3C, so it will use add event listener. So in this case, this kind of checking may not be a good way of doing it, right? Because simply, we're still doing the browser detection. We're still doing checking the nature of the browser, if it's IE or non-IE, right? So what would be a better way of doing that, right? So here, I think it's a feature detection would be a better way. Simply, I don't care the browser version. All I care about is if that particular feature called add event listener will be supported or not, right? So here, your routine would be, if add event listener is true, then I'm going to invoke it. If it's not using add event listener will be supported, then I'm going to use attach event. So in that way, things could be so much clearer. Then regardless it's IE or non-IE, as long as that browser support add event listener, the first condition will be true. And then if it's not support add event listener, then go to the next one, which is use attach event, right? So this is what we call feature detection. You see the power? It's so easy to really just, focus on the feature and then really forget about what kind of, browser version you're using. All right, so hopefully you'll get some idea. Now, obviously there are multiple ways to do feature detection. And then this is actually a very legitimate kind of way to do feature detection. And it looks like so many lines of code, even the monkey will freak out, right? So is there any better way of doing it? Let's take a look. So the good thing is we have Modernizr. How many of you heard about Modernizr? Very good. So in my opinion, Modernizr is one of the best ways to do feature detection. And it's free, it's open source, it's free downloadable, right? Just go to the site to download. And then within the Modernizr, it is very smart. It actually catches up all the major HTML5 as well as CSS3 features. So you could, they actually work with monitor the W3C after HTML5 really closely, so they're adding, updating their list periodically. So it really provides you a very good way to use that as a baseline to check your feature. And then because it's so simple to use, so immediately it got a lot of industry adoption, such as Twitter is using it, National Football, Burger King, all those big players are using it. And then obviously if you're using ASP.NET, as a matter of fact, in the MVC3 too, Modernizr is a part of it too, so you don't have to worry about updating the version of Modernizr all the time. You just actually download the tool, everything will be there. So the other thing is Modernizr is really, this is really something I like about it. It really cares about so for developers, we probably just download whatever version is there, right? The full browser version, what we call. Even though library is very small. But then Modernizr thinks, what if you have a production site? Which means I need to actually go to my last bit of my performance. I want to make sure you put a library there, you will leverage all the bits in the library. I don't want to waste any of the feature, any of the things I'm not using in the library. Hence, they even have a better way of doing a customized build. So based on the features, CSS, and some miscellaneous extra features you might be using in your production site, you could pick the particular feature you want to check, right? And then you could generate a customized build and include that particular library in your code. Isn't that smart? It's pretty smart, right? So you don't waste any additional effort to include a whole browsing library. So this is really cool. Now, if I have a particular feature called a WAF font, WAF is actually a new feature in CSS3, and the way you check is called add font face, right? This new feature. So I could do something like this. Somebody may be happy to do that. Or would you like to do something like this? Right? So this is using Modernizr, and the things would be so much easier. Instead of writing all the JavaScript yourself, Modernizr would just define in such a way, you just have to put a keyword, Modernizr, and then the particular feature you want to check is called font face, right? And that's about it. So let's take a look at a quick demo how we could use Modernizr in our code. So I have a very simple piece of code. What it does is I'm actually using included a Modernizr in my code just like this, include a library. And then what I'm checking is I have an application written by Mark Emery, and basically it's a canvas dancing with some music playing at the background. So the thing I'm checking is using Modernizr to check the canvas as well as audio, these two features, to do feature detection, see if the browser will support it. So if it was supported, then I'm going to play this thing called canvas.js. If it's not, you're going to see something different. All right, so let's take a look. And again, I'm just using IE as a starting point. You could use it in any browser, Firefox or Chrome. So it's an HTML5 application. Okay, so now you see, what you see here is, you see a bunch of canvas dancing. I don't have the audio output, but hopefully you could hear some sound. Okay, so this is what will happen in IE9, because IE9 is supporting HTML5, so it does support canvas and audio. Now, what if I'm actually trying some older browser, for example, IE7 or 8? By the way, this is a developer tool which is embedded in IE9. It's called F12 tool. So you hit F12, you will do that. And you could also do that similar stuff maybe with Firebug or some other tools. So now, if it's an older browser which doesn't support the canvas and audio, then what you see is a whole bunch of hamster dancing, because simply the HTML canvas and audio are not supported in IE7, and so is IE8, right? So, all right, so we get an idea. We know how to use Modernizers to check that particular feature. If it's supported, we do one way. If it's not supported, we do something else. Okay, so let's go back. Now, we already know how to use Modernizr to do feature detection. But what's next? After we figure out a problem, we don't want to always show the customer hamster dancing, right? We want to show something more meaningful, isn't it? So then we probably need to look into Polyfills and shims. So what are they? Polyfills and shims are basically a bunch of JavaScript, HTML, and CSS kind of library. So they basically try to fix the missing feature. For example, fix the problem with not supporting canvas, not supporting audio, all those things. Now then you said, okay, then what is the difference between a Polyfill and a shim? So I actually like to use Paul Irish explanation about that. So Paul says, Polyfill is a shim that mimics a future API providing fallback functionality to old browsers. So basically, Polyfill is a shim, however, it's supporting the future API. For example, I could try to use a geolocation, but then maybe the browser does not support a geolocation, and I need to look into a geolocation Polyfill to resolve the problem. So, a few things to distinguish is Polyfill Polyfills basically is something mimic the standard API, which is more like to support for the future. So it's providing you the development code, even prepare for the future. Whereas shims is basically has its own API. It does not use standard API. Shim is a little bit like what we call quick and dirty job. Basically fix the problem there, right? You have some feature missing, I try to use something to fix that. That's basic shims. But Polyfills in the long run would be much better because it's using standard APIs. It will help you prepare for the future code. Right? Questions so far? Very good. Okay, so now, then you're probably wondering, you said, am I supposed to write all the Polyfills and shims to support to fix all the missing features? Not necessary. There is quite a big set of GitHub. So on the GitHub, you will be able to find all kinds of Polyfills and shims to fix various of the features on HTML5 and CSS. For example, SVG, canvas, web storage, especially local storage and session storage, session elements, some of the video support as well as audio. And then this one doesn't really show the IndexedDB, but then for HTML5, the standard database is actually IndexedDB, it's not Web SQL anymore. Web forms, there's some accessibility support as well as if you're interested in web workers and web sockets, they also have different Polyfills and shims to support that. Geolocation, we'll talk about that. Offline storage technique, application cache, and there's a lot of other things that are available. Now, so we have a list of those huge list of Polyfills and shims which you could use on GitHub. And then if you want, I could make it a little bigger so you could take a look at the URL. So it's under GitHub's Modernizr/Modernizr/wiki. And then basically you go through that and you will find HTML5 cross-browser Polyfills, things like that. Okay, so now, there are so many different routines which will help you to do Polyfills and shims, but not all of them might be that great. So I didn't have a chance to go through the whole list yet because it's actually growing all the time. But I did try a few things. I would recommend or share with you the things I already tried. For example, for the Polyfills, HTML5 shim would be a great one to fix all the semantic tag. Because semantic tag, for those of you who did not know, those are the new vocabulary in HTML5. It has a bunch of new tags like a header, footer, and all those things. And then for storage, Polyfill, you could use HTML5 to fix the HTML5 logo storage. You could use storage Polyfill. Also, there is another one which is try to simulate the HTML5 forms kind of format. It's called H5F, and you could also use that. For shims, there's one pretty good one. It's called Amplify Store, which actually resolves all the persistence issue on the client side. So you could use that to fix some of the problem. And then there is another one called Easy XDN, where we'll try to across domain messages. So you could use all those things. And plus, there will be a lot of good ones over there, but just you want to use as a caution. So general rule is, does it work as expected? That's very important. Right, so sometimes it says, oh, it's going to resolve this particular issue, but it may not already support that feature. So you will have to make sure it is supporting, not just supporting that missing feature, but also make sure it's still cross browsers, because that's the big, motivation behind to have HTML5. It's cross browsers, right? So to make sure it's cross browsers, and also you have to probably look into to see the solution if it's, has to be maintainable, because you may be working in a larger team. After you leave a team, nobody could understand what's a fix. So you may want to actually think about, does it also help you to do the maintenance and so on. So sometimes it is true, if you don't find a good Polyfill shim to support your missing feature, then maybe you have to write your own. Okay, so let's actually start with something, give you some idea how do I approach some of the problems. So we're going to actually do a few examples. First, we're going to take a look if we use all the nice semantic tags, what's going to happen, right, with the older browser. And we also want to show you how to handle the video gracefully for different browsers. Medium queries is one of my favorite features. It's on CSS3, and how do we actually support that? And also we're going to actually share with you the conditional resource loader, because some people still think about, hey, performance is important. And based on what you showed me, you already want to put, say, something like a Modernizr, and I'm sure you're going to put a lot more polyfills and shims in the starting page. Then is that do you concern about the performance? Is there any way we could actually make it better? We'll talk about that. Okay, so this will probably a review. All of you know that, right? I would assume, right? So basically, this is just give you a lot of new semantic tags. Like in the past, we used div and span to represent all the different layouts in the page. But obviously, with nowadays, all those HTML5 tags, we use a new tag such as header, navigation area, a sidebar, session, and article, and footer, right? So those are the new vocabulary we're going to use in the HTML5. So I might actually try to just write a sample application. I actually used some of the new tags. What I does here is, this is a particular one to show my blog posting. So I did use a header, I used session, I used a body part for the article. Each session could contain multiple articles, and I did use footer, right? So, and then I could have another session which contains another article, and so on. So basically, this tries to represent a blog posting. Now, let's take a look. If I'm running on, IE9, this is what it will look like. And obviously, we could actually try to run it on the other browser, for example, Firefox. It will look very similar, right? And so is Chrome. Looks very similar, right? So, well, because it's just a purely HTML5 application, so it's really cross browsers. I'm just using IE9 because then I could show you what happened into the older browser like IE7 or 8, right? So this is IE9, so it looks pretty good. Now, if I'm actually going into IE7, ooh, not very nice, isn't it? So I don't really see the nice header, the shade, everything on the background is gone. The words seem like a little raw, it's kind of, not very organized. And so is IE8, right? So it's not doing any better. So, okay, so let's take a look how we could actually fix the problem. So the first thing we would do is we take a look, we understand that obviously I'm using a bunch of new semantic tag. So the older browser won't support a semantic tag, so they won't recognize, obviously, that's the first question. And then what we usually do is we say we could actually grab what we call HTML5 reset style sheet. So this is a style sheet. Let's actually take a look what's inside. So this is style sheet actually developed by Rich Clark. So you could actually use that as a starting point, or you could just modify it. So the most important thing in his reset HTML5 style sheet is he actually did put all the new vocabulary defining here, and then try to say display as a block, right? So this is a pretty good fix. So then afterwards, all those new vocabulary, they would know what I'm supposed to do with the new tag, I'm supposed to display as a block. That's what we do. Okay, so first we add that. Let's go back. And then next, obviously, we need to do feature detection using Modernizr, right? So I'm actually going to put my Modernizr here. And then once I include a Modernizr also have HTML5 for shim, which will actually resolve all the new semantic tags as well. Okay, so looks pretty good. Let's actually give it a try to see if it helps, right? So let's go back to this page, and then let's do force reader. Wow, pretty good. Immediately, looks like all the new vocabulary already go back to the layout we defined with the header, footer, body, all those things. So let me actually put this one. Okay, and then I also have a little shaded on the background, right? Like the background. Now, I think, do we have some designers here? Is that true? People were saying, if your corner is not rounded, it's not a good design. So I'm thinking about it, maybe I should go back to the code to fix the square corner into a rounded corner, so make them much better. So let's go back, and then I know that with all the runner corner, all the support is basically we were using what we call border radius, right? Border radius is a new feature in CSS3, which will give you runner corner. Okay, so what I would do is I'm thinking about how I'm going to fix the problem. So I'm actually introducing the jQuery here. I'm trying to use the jQuery shim solution to resolve the problem. So what I do is again, using Modernizr to checking if that border radius will be actually supported or not. Now in this case, if it's not supported, then I'm going to actually using the jQuery shim feature, which is called jQuery corner. And then once I use this, I could say apply any of the articles with invoke a method called a corner, right? So this is my jQuery shim way to resolve the runner corner issue, right? So save it. Go back, let's take a look. Wow, looks like it does resolve the problem. Now it's runner corner. Now it's supposed to be a better design. So, okay, so this is IE7, right? Let's take a look at IE8, right? As well as IE9. Not much change, right? This is a really app with a new semantic tag, but after we apply a few things. So wrap it up, what we do is we first apply HTML5 statute to reset to make sure the browser understands those new vocabulary, at least display them as a block. And then we use Modernizr, right? We include Modernizr library. And then we use Modernizr to check that particular border radius around the corner feature is supported or not. If it's not supported, we actually use jQuery shim to solve that. That's how we see it. Any questions so far? Okay, very good. So this is actually just one example to show you how you could actually use this particular process to resolve the problem. Next, let's take a look at the video. So obviously, most of you already know the video, right? Anybody didn't know the video? Use the HTML5 video tag? Okay, so I'm not going to go over the detail. Basically, for the HTML5 video, it's not a plugin experience anymore. We could use HTML5 video, use a markup tags to really represent this piece of video. Because we all know once we use a plugin feature, then there's no way for us to access any of the video data inside that player. So HTML5 video actually gives us a more powerful way to manipulate video data and do something really fun. Plus, it also helps to do cross browsers. So before I get into the video, I'd like to just quickly go over a little caveat on the capability of the video format for different browsers. So again, and all the number here meaning that's a minimum version and above. So IE9 basically supports 264 video format. This is basically MP4. It's an industry standard. IE9 also supports WebM, but you need to have the WebM installer. So, and then also I think Chrome also supports WebM, and they said they may not support MP4 anymore, but as of today they still support it. Safari only supports MP4, and then for Firefox and Opera, they don't really like to take the pay the license fee, right, for the royalty fee for the industry, those MP4 files. So they say they're only going to support a WebM. Okay, so this is a compatibility table. What does that tell you? Basically tells you is I could not just rely on one video source to make it across browsers. I probably should support a minimum 2 video format. One is MP4, one is WebM, right? And so this is what I'm going to do in my video. Right? Any questions? Okay. So luckily with HTML5, we have a very nice feature called fallback, right? So the fallback, it really makes things a lot easier for developers like us. Because in the past, a lot of time all the error message is from our implementation. It's not directly from something like so easy from the markup level, right? But with most of HTML5 new feature, new tags like video, canvas, audio, SVG, they all have the fallback mechanism implemented. Meaning I could put the fallback content between my tag. In this case, it's a video tag. So if it's a browser will recognize this video tag, then it will play this MP4 in this case. But if it's older browser doesn't recognize, or maybe it just doesn't, even modern browser doesn't support MP4, then whatever in the middle, the text, the content will be displayed, right? This is called fallback. So we're going to use that to see how we could make a cross-browser video player. So this is basically how we could say using the HTML5 video and the diagramming carefully. Very simple, we put a video tag, define the ID. In this case, I will make it an autoplay as well as have a little control bar on top of that. And then one of the source I put is, I'm actually listing the video MP4. I'm putting my MP4 file first. And then in order to support like Firefox and Opera, I need to support a WebM. So I'm converting this MP4, I could use Mirror or those two to convert it into another video format. It's called WebM. So I put a WebM here, right? And then these will probably work for all the modern browsers with supported video tag. What if you have the older browsers, which definitely, they still need something like a Flash or Silverlight player as a plugin, right, to do the video. In that sense, I'm actually giving you an example, put some of the older tradition, the Silverlight or older way to actually put it as a player and to do that. So, after I go over that, hopefully you get some idea how we do fallback with a video tag. So let's take a look. So inside the demo, I'm actually going to do a few more things. First of all, I'm going to actually, because I'm using Visual Studio, and it is actually just using a particular sort of baby studio sort of inside it. So I want to make sure first I'm actually switch into IIS server. So now I'm already switched to IIS server. And then the second thing is because all the MIME type, for example, MP4, WebM, OGV, SVG, all those are new vocabulary for the server. So if your server may not recognize those new MIME type, then you need to actually configure it into the web.config. You could simply, obviously, if you have access to the web server, you could obviously add it in onto a web server so that it will recognize all the new video or audio data format. However, most likely you won't have direct access. For example, your server is in the cloud or something, right? So more likely you should actually configure into your web.config, right? So this is actually pretty handy. Once you define all the new MI type, then you will be able to use it. Okay, so let's take a look at this video file. So I have a quick video, which I'm going to actually just play it. This is IE9, so it looks like it's doing okay. And we could also play it, say in, try a different one. Which one you want me to try first? Firefox or Chrome? Chrome, okay, let's try Chrome. Yes, Chrome is working fine because Chrome does support MP4, right? So this should be fine. That's good. So what happened is, and then how about let's try Firefox, right? So Firefox, it says no video with supported format data in my type font. Basically, why? Right, because it doesn't support MP4, right? It only supports WebM, right? So Firefox. So let's go back, and let's put the WebM file there. Define a type as well as the video, right? So after we do that, hopefully it will run. Okay. So it does, because Firefox does recognize a WebM, so that's why it could actually basically play it, right? So now you probably ask then, so for example, IE and Chrome, they both recognize MP4, WebM, which one they will do first? So normally what it does is they go through the code and they see whatever the first video format it will support, it will run. So both of them will pick MP4 first. And also, I think a while ago, there is a particular bug or something on iPhone or iPad, so you have to put an MP4 in the beginning, then WebM. So that's sort of the sequence we're using. All right, so now it's all good. All the modern browsers seem to play the video fine. And take a look what happened to the old browser? So, I quit it. Okay, let me write it one more time. So again, this is running on IE, it looks good. So if I do on 7, nothing actually showed up. On IE8, also nothing, right? So meaning, basically I haven't put any fallback between the video yet, and doesn't recognize this new video format, MP4 or WebM. So I have to, in this case, fall back into a plugin kind of a way of doing things. So here I'm saving some data, which is for to get around with a Silverlight kind of player. So one more thing I need to check is I want to make sure the local host, I'm hosting this particular player on my machine, and I want to make sure the port number is consistent. Okay. Okay, now I fixed all the plugin issues. So now I have to use a plugin, which in this case is Silverlight kind of approach to hopefully it will work. Okay, let's take a look. So go back to the browser, which doesn't have anything. Let's do a refresh. Okay, so what you see here is you simply see, obviously it's different, right? You see a plugin player. And if you click on this player, then this particular video will play. Now this is really go back to Silverlight player with IE7, and the same thing with IE8, right? And if I go to IE9, which is using the HTML5 video, you will see actually something different. You will automatically play on everything. All right, so this is actually just show you how we could actually support a very simple, just a video file, right? Make it across browsers, as well as make it work with older browsers, like IE7 or 8. And you could try the same way for some old Firefox and so on. Good? Questions? Very good. So let me move on. So next, what I want to try is the medium queries. Now, medium queries, how many of you actually never heard about medium queries? Okay, so fair enough. So medium queries is a CSS3 new feature. What it try to does is, say we live in a pretty big world, right? We want to support application running on a laptop like this, or maybe a big screen, big TV, maybe on the phone, maybe on a tablet. So we're really facing this with a different device, with different size, different orientation, different resolution, right? So in the past, obviously, if people say, write some application support for different devices, obviously you could do it. But it's not really trivial to support different devices, right? Now that's great. We have our medium queries, right? Medium queries provide you a way which you could actually changing your size based on that particular device size. Then you could decide what is the content you want to display. You could actually apply a totally different CSS style sheet, or you could do something about it so that it will make sense for your particular size of the device, right? So this is a medium query. And then a lot of times we don't, medium query is a new feature, so the older browser won't support it. So how are we going to do that? So luckily there is quite a few JavaScript library, quite a few shims try to resolve the problem. One of them I'll share with you is called respond.js. Again, it's on GitHub, it's an open source project, you can take a look. And then simply you could just put that library into your code, and your code will actually have the minimum support of medium query. So let me actually share with you an example. This respond.js is very good. It's actually using responsive kind of a web design pattern. So let me actually show you. So this is the code, and let me show you what it looks like. So when I actually have a really large screen like this, then the background will turn orange, right? So when I actually making the browser smaller, let me show you this. It's still orange. When I reach to a certain device size, which is smaller, the background will turn blue. And if we keep on going, make it even smaller, it turns red. And when we get into particular size smaller, it's green. And the green is probably smallest. Okay, so let me show you what it does with the original implementation in the CSS. So in the CSS, this is really using the medium query. So you will see there's a new vocabulary called media. And then they were defining the screen size. In this case, it's a screen size between 480 to 620 pixels. Obviously, the size will be different. It's just a demo. You will have your own size. Then in this case, I said that the background will turn to gray. That's what we see when we reduce into really small, we see green background. And when the size is getting bigger, when we say the minimum size will be definitely bigger than 620 pixels, then I will actually turn my background into red. That's what we see, red. And then similar concept. When this particular screen size, the minimum size is 800, then it's blue. And then when it's 1100 or above, we talk about a large size, then it will be orange, like we see before. Right? Get it? So this is how you could use medium query, use a more systematic way to support a different size of the devices, and plus you could actually play with orientation, resolution, aspect ratio, and all those things in the medium query. So it's pretty powerful, right? Okay, so we get an idea. Now, I know that it is working in IE 9 as well as all the modern browsers support a medium query like Chrome, Firefox. But what if we change it into things like F7, right? Ooh. So basically, it just, you could see there's no background color show up. Black is basically a browser's default color, right? So if we change the size of the browser, nothing happens. Because medium query simply is not supported, right, inside this. So what we do is very easily, we go back to this piece of code, and then we do something like, I cheated a little bit, I put a JavaScript library here. So what we could do is, we could just include this respond.minified JavaScript into the header. So this would be a JavaScript to help us fix the medium query kind of issue. So include a library, and then let's go back and refresh. Wow. Immediately, it's in IE7 again, and immediately we can see this whole application seems like it supports a medium query, okay. Sorry. And then when we resize it, then we start to see with different size, the background start to change the color. Isn't that cool? So now you could actually use medium query even with old browsers, right? Okay. Any questions so far? Good. All right. All right, so next, now, by the way, there are quite a few good medium query supported sites. One of them is bostonglobal.com. So if you get a chance, you could take a look at the site. They're doing a good job with supporting the medium query as well as support for different browser versions. So it's really good. Next, what I want to spend a little time to talk about it is, a lot of times people just say, okay, it's easy for you to say, include a Modernizr, include respond.js, including this Polyfills, jQuery, including this and that into the header, because you do need them to put in a header in order for the browser to see, these are all the JavaScript, and then I'm going to use some of the feature there to fix a problem. So people say, it's easy for you to say, just adding this and that, resolve the missing feature, resolve the problem, right? But in reality, what if you put in too many of those JavaScript library? Aren't you worried about a too big overhead at the beginning? Aren't you worried about the performance on the first page, right? Is that absolutely we need to do in such a fashion that it include all the libraries in the header right at the beginning? So the answer is not necessary. If you actually have a small number of those JavaScript library and those are pretty small, relatively small, maybe that's not your concern. But again, you would be the one to know if your performance is good or not, right? Because if you do a benchmark, it's basically your environment, your browser will make sense, right? So you have to do testing to see if the performance is something you like. If you don't like, then you will see if I could have used some other things. One of the loader I want to share with you is called yepnope.js. It's a very nice conditional resource loader. It's a JavaScript CSS library. So use that particular loader, you basically separate the execution and the loading into two parts. And also, you will be able to conditionally work with Modernizr to conditionally decide if I need to load that library or not. So let's take a quick look. So one of the example we have here is you include your YepNope library. I know it's a little awkward, right? YepNope. YepNope library here, and then it's very small, right? Only a few kilobytes. And then inside of JavaScript, obviously you need to load your Modernizr before that. Then it will say you will set up a condition, in this case called test, right? Test the condition. We want to see if the geolocation will be supported or not. So I'm testing this condition and using Modernizr. And if it's a yep, the response is yes, the geolocation will be supported, then I'm going to actually load it a normal way for my application called normal.js. Now, if in that case, the geolocation is not going to be supported, then you get a no response. Then in that sense, you are actually going to look for a geolocation polyfills. You're going to look for that, and then maybe you will look for another wrapper class, wrapper JavaScript to resolve the problem. Right? So that way, what you see is you're actually using YepNope and the Modernizr. You actually could have much better control about what particular JavaScript library or particular resource you want to load. Hence, it will actually help you to improve the performance. Isn't that cool? Okay, very good. And then obviously there are quite a few other similar kinds of like those what they call dynamic loader you could use. But I particularly feel YepNope is pretty easy to use because it works with Modernizr very well. And so it will be consistent with my feature detection and so on. Okay. So, and for those of you interested to get a YepNope, this is actually the URL you will be able to get it. And then it's integrated with Modernizr. It's only 1.6 kilobytes, so it's very small. All right, so the other things I think might be a little fun to show you something, how I could change the MSNBC site. And what I would try to do is try to create a cross-browser plugin-free experience, right? So this is a real site. And I want to sort of just share with you some of the experience, some of the steps I did with the site. So nowadays, plugin-free experience is very, very important, right? A lot of, what I mean plugin is meaning basically refers to those browser extensions that run native client code using very level browser interfaces. For example, Adobe Flash, ActiveX controls, some of browser help objects, some of the WebKit kind of approach is also a sort of plugin kind of approach. So most of the time, more and more browsers start to adopt plugin-free approach, meaning they will no longer support those plugins, right? So, and also a lot of other browsers that do support a plugin, they basically offer many ways to run some plugin-free experience. I will use YouTube as example, right? If you go to the YouTube, obviously you could do a traditional way, play a fresh, and then load it, but you could also do a /HTML5, get into a HTML5 trial, you could actually play a HTML5 video, right? So basically, what we're having is we have a relatively kind of traditional kind of implementation with our MSNBC. And then obviously it's not really updated to the plugin-free experience yet, right? So I want to actually show you some of the techniques we used and try to actually make it a plugin-free, right? And I want to go over some of the steps or some of the things I learned from them. So normally, if you don't have any those bfresh player installed, if you go to this the NBC site, you will see something they ask you to actually download the fresh player like this, right? But obviously, we want to actually try to do, if the modern browser will support HTML5 video, then I don't want to use a fresh player. So what I would do is first, want to make sure my particular application is compliant with HTML5. What's the best way of seeing in the header if it's HTML5 or not HTML5 app? Anybody? Doc type. Right? With HTML5, the doc type is so simple. It's just HTML. And with the old way HTML4, you actually put a lot of those XML data. How many of you could remember those HTML4 XML data? Somebody said they can. I couldn't. I could never remember. I'll just do copy and paste. But really, one thing, first thing you want to look into if it's an HTML5 app, you want to make sure to put doc type HTML into it. And next, what you want to do is, if you use some of the CSS3 feature, and those features are really new because you know CSS3 is actually in a state of change. There's a lot of new standard coming out, new updates, and so hence there is a way for now is use vendor prefix. So, and then you could see, there's in the past, there is the original one used a lot of WebKit kind of prefix to represent the gradient line. So gradient is actually a new feature, right? And then if you see that, you will see, if you want to make sure it's truly cross browsers, you want to make sure you put the prefix to represent different browsers. For example, you need to put not just WebKit to support a Safari and a Chrome. You also need to put, to support a Mozilla, you need to put a mouse and a linear gradient. And to support IE, you need to put a prefix MS, as well as Opera. And then finally, this is, I'm hoping, in the final release, when we no longer use a prefix for all the CSS3, you should just put a linear gradient like this. So basically, you will put three or five prefix, and then one sort of the one you're going to use in the future. Right? So, but it's not too bad because you could actually use some tools like they call prefix-free kind of tool. It's a tool. You could actually let that to generate all the prefix. So it's not like you have to write it every time, right? You could adapt your tools to do that. Okay, so the other things we need to check is if you look into a lot of those existing browsers, you will see there's a lot of sniffing methods, browser sniffing methods we use, right? You probably use that in your code as well. Now, for example, I see this particular site, what they use is to check the iPad. They use a user agent to check the iPad. They say, if it's really, loading, using the iPad, then it's an HTML5 experience, right? If it's not, then you load the fresh, basically plugin kind of experience. However, if you look at this statement, did you see something wrong? What if I'm a non-iPad device? And for example, what if it's IE10 Metro application or some other browser which does not which is not running on iPad, but it's also using HTML5, it supports HTML5. Then this particular statement will be probably wrong, right? So again, this is still checking the particular device type, particular browser. Like we said before, we don't want to do browser detection, right? It's not a good way. And the other thing is sometimes they use user agent to match with the IE version. And again, this is not a very good way because what it does is it's checking single digit of that IE version. And what if you have IE10 and above, you have 2 digits, right? So this will fail. So again, this is really doing all the what we call browser sniffing, the browser detection kind of way. So, and also don't forget a user agent string is not immutable. All right, there's a lot of things you could change that. You could change it by plugins, or any user could change it, or a lot of modern browsers, they have a development tool. You can easily change a user agent. So it's not that secure to always rely on user agent information. So what we could do is using changing this particular code. This is what we show in the sniffing mode when it's running inside the development tool. And then instead of using all the sniffing way, you could actually do a feature detection, right? Use either Modernizr, or you could actually simply do a document, right? Just to use a JavaScript to check if I could do can play type. Check the video tag, the can play type basically said if you can, then you load HTML5 kind of video. If not, you load the fresh kind of video, right? That's what we would change. But then you probably wonder, and you said, it's a live site. We don't have access. How do we do some kind of experiment to make sure I can change it? The one I use is called, I use Fiddler 2. I use Fiddler, which I modify the remote files. As well, they are running on your local machine. And then you could change it, apply the change really onto the site to see what's going on. Okay, so and again, one more time, I'm replacing this iPad version with this can play HTML5 video version. Okay, so this is snapshots, but let me show you what it would look like if I'm just having, say if I'm just running a regular site. I'm not applying any of the HTML5 feature onto it. This what will look like. takes a little while to load the video and everything. So this is basically a Flash player. This is what it looks like for IE9, as well as I believe it's for IE7 as well. Okay, so this is basically a Flash version, right? So how we can actually use Fiddler to change it into supporting the HTML5 video. So what we do is we go to Fiddler. And then, so what we do is we actually catching up a few things. We use what we call auto-responder. Inside of auto-responder, you could actually grab the particular sessions you're working with, and then grab it here. I could just show you one of the example. For example, I try to play is I could edit this particular response, right? So I don't know if you can see that. But I changed all the title from a regular HTML into the doc type HTML, right? That's what I did. And then I'm also checking, I think it's this one here. I'm also checking to see if I could change some of the player, for example. It is here. I changed the iPad one, the response to checking the iPad into this video can play type, right? And then, because I don't know if they have an MP4 video player or not, so last what I do is just do some experiments. Oh, sorry, I didn't edit anything. What I do is, instead of just playing a regular move kind of file, I let it to play one of my demo file, which is the MP4 file, the Big Bird file. So after I turn on this, then what you will see is, let's go back to IE9. Let's do apply the Fiddler onto it, and let me do. Now what we see here is with IE9, which will recognize the HTML5 video player. Then I actually have a little thing, and instead of playing all the MVC or the video, I'm actually playing an MP4 video here, which is the Big Bird, right? So this is how I'm going to actually change a non-plugin-free kind of browser into plugin-free with the HTML5 video.